February. The woman in the hospital bed squeezed her eyes shut. Her gray hair fluffed around her head, the tiny wisps catching the air currents. Nate heard her labored breathing, the beeps of various machines, and the rhythmic hiss of the oxygen. His heart ached. Lilly Connor would have suffered through this alone if he hadn't been here.
"Stop scowling. I thought we cured you of that."
Her voice was soft, but it still carried the sass he'd grown used to over the last 2 years. "I promise to do better." He took her hand in his. Her skin was paper dry and loose over her knuckles. "How are you feeling?"
"Like it'll be over soon."
She took a long time to blink. "Don't say that."
It's time, and I'll be glad to finally be with my Josiah again."
She sighed and tried to sit up. Nate helped her shift the pillows until she felt more comfortable.
"There's only the one regret."
He nodded. He knew exactly to what she referred. All these years, and she'd never been able to heal the rift with her only daughter, Abby. Because of that, she'd never met her grandchildren. Even so, she changed her will so one of them, a certain Lilly Ramirez from Dallas, would inherit everything. Previously, it had been slated to go to Mrs. Lilly's brother-in-law, Nate's boss, Brandon Connor. Nate couldn't care less about the little cottage or the clutter that filled it, and he knew his boss didn't want it either. But he didn't think the younger Lilly deserved anything from the sweet woman who'd adopted him as her own. The granddaughter had never visited, never called or written letters that he knew of. None of them had.
"Nathaniel, I said to stop."
She scolded him again, and he tried to shift his thoughts.
"I know you don't approve, but it's none of your business."
"Yes, ma'am."
"Now, I need your help."
She waved him closer like she didn't want anyone to overhear.
"I need you to exorcise Gypsy until Lilly gets here. I don't trust no one else."
"You know I love Gyp as much as you." Nate thought of the mare Mrs. Lilly boarded at a ranch outside of town. The old lady, as he called the horse, was getting up in years, but was as gentle as ever. He wondered what the younger Lilly would do with the horse.
"There's one more thing."
Mrs. Lilly had a glint in her eyes. The kind that always meant trouble for him.
"You'll have to teach my granddaughter how to ride. She may live in Texas, but I can't find any trace she's ever been around horses."
Nate cringed. "Mrs. Lilly, I don't think—" She lifted her hands like she was going to wave them at him, but halfway up they dropped back to the bed.
"No, listen. She'll be new here and won't know anyone. She's gonna need someone to help her out."
"Someone will step up." He swallowed a lump in his throat.
"I'm asking you to step up."
Mrs. Lilly wilted into the pillows. The little color she had faded.
"Please, do it for me."
Nate squeezed the old woman's bony hand. She'd gone out of her way to make him feel welcome the last 2 years, to make him smile when he thought he never would again. She was the only one who knew why he'd left his home in Colorado. The last thing he needed was to run into the prodigal granddaughter. But Mrs. Lilly had become a surrogate grandmother. The least he could do was honor her last wish. "Okay."
"Good."
She patted his hand.
"One last thing. Forgive yourself and get on with your life. You're too young to mope around like this."
"I don't think," he started.
"No, you think too much and don't feel. Your wife wouldn't have wanted that for you."
"Probably not." The familiar sadness proved he still felt more than he cared to.
"Then do us all a favor and start smiling."
"Yes, ma'am." He practiced one just for her. It felt unnatural, but after she was gone, she wouldn't know if he never did it again. Lilly Ramirez leaned forward. gripping the steering wheel with both hands. Her family dynamics had changed overnight, and her head was still spinning. She'd been at work when a lawyer found her and delivered a large envelope of papers. Thank goodness her boss had been around to help her deal with the shock of what they contained. Lilly never knew she had a grandmother living somewhere in Arkansas. Now she'd passed away, and it was too late to meet her. After a yelling match about keeping secrets with Abby, her mom, Lilly had run home to her apartment and packed a bag. She tossed and turned in bed a few hours before leaving Dallas and heading for Eureka Springs, Arkansas. She drove 6 hours straight, only stopping for gas and bathroom breaks. Now she was tired and cranky, on top of being emotionally raw. The highway had given way to hilly, winding roads. To make matters worse, her GPS kept rerouting, and cars lined up behind her slow forward motion. If she couldn't find her grandma's house soon, she'd have to drive back to town and ask for directions. Lilly didn't feel like talking to anyone in her sensitive state. Abby had made it clear she didn't want Lilly going to Eureka Springs. Her final warning still rang in her ears. "I'll never speak to you again if you go to that town. Not after the way they treated your father." Even though she worried about the ultimatum, Lilly had to know more about her maternal grandma. She'd walked away, knowing Abby wasn't joking or tossing out idle threats. The fact that Abby had hidden her own mother's existence for all 28 years of Lilly's life was proof of that. A stray tear escaped, and she swiped at it. Even in her anger, she couldn't deny the fear. What if her choice ended her relationship with her mother? It had been strained for years, evident by Lilly's refusal to call Abby Mom. She'd have to trust that Poppy could bring her around. "Ayúdame," she whispered a plea for help. Shaking her head, she tried to calm down. Lilly only slipped into Spanish when she was tired, frustrated, or angry, or when she was visiting her puppy's family in Mexico. Her thoughts turned back to the unknown grandmother. "Grandma Connor, don't let me lose her over this." Lilly had started the conversation with her grandma an hour into the trip. It helped calm her down. Lilly told her about her life and all her worries. Then she asked questions, hoping the little house would hold the answers. If she could ever find it! A peace settled in her heart. She took a shaky breath and relaxed her grip on the steering wheel. "Rerouting." The monotone voice shattered the moment of calm. "Argh! That's it!" Lilly slapped the console. She found a gravel drive and pulled in to let the other cars pass. Then she turned back toward Eureka Springs. It was time to give in and ask for help. Lilly pulled into a little gift shop on the edge of town. It looked like it sold rocks and broken glass. Outside, stalls held what looked like rock dust, pebbles, small stones, all the way up to large garden-sized specimens. The short walk from the car to the door reminded her she hadn't driven far enough north for the summer. Arkansas was every bit as hot and humid as home, and it would only get hotter as summer matured. The store was divided into sections, the first one cluttered with red and white sports trinkets and clothing, all of it printed with "Go Razorbacks" or some hog image. She passed into the main area that contained a little of everything else and walked straight to the register and the woman staring at her. "Excuse me, I'm looking for County Road 117. Lilly noticed 2 dogs lounging on a huge pillow behind the counter, one small, one large. They didn't even spare her a glance, clearly used to strangers coming in and out of the store. The woman continued to gape over the rims of her glasses for another second. "You must be Mrs. Lilly's granddaughter." Lilly narrowed her eyes. "Yes. How did you know?" "Small town, and we've all been waiting to meet you." The woman smiled, walked around the counter, and pulled Lilly into a hug. "Mrs. Lilly talked about you all the time. I wish you could have met her." It wasn't a hug between strangers. This woman squeezed her tight, like she was holding something dear. It startled Lilly so much, a lump rose in her throat, and the tears gathered again. She blinked them away and allowed herself to hug the other woman before pulling away. "Me too. What's your name?" "Sorry, I'm Florence DeWitt. You can call me Flo. Half the town's been watching and waiting for you since the funeral first week of March. What? Lilly didn't know what to think. They'd had 3.5 months to anticipate her arrival, while she was oblivious to their existence. It felt weird to think people might recognize her when she wouldn't know anyone. Like I said, small town. Flo waved her hand in the air. Word gets around, and by the time Mrs. Lilly's funeral was over, we all knew she'd left everything to you. Feel free to ask for any help you might need. Lilly tried not to shudder. Did the town wonder why her and not Abby? Or one of her older siblings? That one thing had infuriated Abby the most when she'd learned the details of the will. Lilly pushed that train of thought away. Right now, I just want to find the house and get some sleep. It's been a crazy night and an even longer drive. Flo looked at her with sympathy. I'm sure it has. The house isn't hard to find once you know what you're looking for. She pulled out a piece of paper and drew a map. She pointed to the lines as she talked. Go back down 62 past the Thorncrown Chapel and over the bridge, another half mile to a mile, and you'll get to the gas station. Turn left, there. 117 is the first road to the left after that. Mrs. Lilly's is all the way at the end. Thanks. I know I passed that gas station several times already. She took the map and turned for the door. Lilly, I don't think there's any food at that house. I live right down the road. She pointed toward the wall opposite her. I put my address on the map. We eat around 7. Lilly noticed that lump again. Abby had been adamant no one would embrace her jet black hair and olive skin. But this woman was warm and welcoming. She already felt more at home here than in her parents' mini mansion. She nodded at Flo, afraid to say anything, and hurried to her car. Feeling much more hopeful, she made her way back down the road. Maybe this summer wouldn't be as bad as she thought. Her boss told her to take all the time she needed to go through her grandma's estate. She'd planned to be fast, but maybe she'd stick around longer. She could learn about this hidden side of the family. A summer without Abby breathing down her back to get a real job, as she put it, would be nice too. Lilly might even figure out how to fight for her own dreams. She turned at the gas station, and this time she found the little dirt road easily. Even though she drove slowly, enjoying the canopy the trees made over the road, a trail of dust grew behind her. Despite that, the world was green everywhere she looked. She passed a couple of houses before reaching a mailbox at the end with the name Connor on it. Lilly couldn't see the house, but a little field dotted with trees and wildflowers made its way over a gentle hill, hiding what lay beyond. There was plenty of room to plant flowers, maybe even set up a greenhouse or two. Don't be silly. She pushed the thought to the back of her mind, but that spark of hope doubled. If she owned all this land, her goals might be more achievable than she'd thought. The house sat next to the edge of a wood, almost disappearing into the trees. There was a spot of dirt to park on and several overgrown flower beds, but it was the house that held her attention. The hardboard siding was a dull gray with cream trim that had seen better and brighter days. River rock lined the front patio, and the porch rail was covered in ivy and flowers that should have been trellised, but roamed free instead. An old rocking chair on the front porch looked like a good place to soak in the peace and quiet only nature could offer. Even lonely and forgotten, it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Its slightly wild look was the complete opposite of her parents' manicured home. That endeared it to her even more. The gardens contained bright spots of color peeking through the overgrown weeds, calling the plant lover in her to get her hands dirty. Later. She grabbed her cell phone and called her mom. It went straight to voicemail. Abby, I made it to Eureka Springs. Just wanted you to know. Call me. She paused, thinking of all the fights they'd had the last few years. Love you. She hit end and grabbed her purse. The screen door made a lovely sound when she opened it. Her hand shook as she lifted the key. It took 2 tries before she managed to get the door unlocked. Inside was dark, The thick smell of a closed-up house, mingled with old furniture and years of greasy Southern cooking, greeted her. Lilly recognized it for what it was, the scent of a woman she'd never know. Lilly flipped the light switch to reveal a cozy place filled with vintage furniture, lots of doilies, and other knickknacks. Exhaustion set in. She moved through the house, opening the windows to let the stuffiness out, before finding her grandma's bed and falling into it. Even the heat didn't bother her, as she succumbed to the much-needed sleep.